Good day, beautiful people, and welcome to the Digital Nomad Finance Bro YouTube channel, a brand new YouTube channel where I'll be bringing you the best concepts in improving your career, finding remote work, setting up your own location independent business, and choosing your best country where to live. Today, we'll be covering how to properly prep for an interview with a particular focus on corporate and regular positions. I'll be walking you through my exact process that I take to prepare for an interview. And I've worked at 5 different jobs in 4 different companies in both financial analyst and sort of senior management, sort of senior strategy manager roles at some of the largest corporations in Canada where I'm located now. So there are essentially 5 steps that I take. The first is to dissect the job posting. You want to look through it thoroughly, read it 2 to 3 times, take notes on it, and then summarize it into your own words. The step number 2. And once you have a very clear understanding of the exact candidate that they're looking to hire, you want to ready yourself with 3 to 6 star stories that you can pull out in the interview to make yourself appear like the exact dream candidate that they are looking for. In addition to your star stories, you want to anticipate what other questions they may ask and what kind of answer you are expected to give. And lastly, you want to prepare your questions because inevitably, as the interview starts winding down, they'll ask you, do you have any questions for us? This is not your time to say, I don't know, I'm okay. You want to ask some good questions that'll make them realize this guy understands exactly what we're looking for and this guy is ready to hit the ground running, guy or girl. So we'll be following through with a real case. And for you today, I found this job posting here, which actually applies to my own career search. So essentially, this is a senior associate within their strategy department. Looks a little confusing because it's senior associate, but strategy analyst. This is just the name of the department, I guess, but is a senior associate. So step number 1 is to read through the job posting thoroughly. You want to read it once, you want to read it twice, and you want to read it a 3rd time to ensure you have all the details that you need. You want to start taking notes and you want to start bolding the key words. So I went ahead and did that here, but just to quickly kind of walk through how you would do it, you would see it like this. So paragraph number 1, for 30 years, we're on a mission, build relationships. So they describe their company. Paragraph 2, our strategy analysts. So some people might skim over this because usually the first few paragraphs, they simply just talk about how the company's an equal opportunity employer and they're so excited to be hiring people and they don't say much. In this case, they actually talk about your specific department you'll be working in, deep data analytics, strategic decisioning, high ownership over work, see projects end to end, rotate across the business, carve your own trajectory. So you get some details here about the role. They go into more details. Obviously, coming down a little further, you can see they have specific technical knowledge like SQL, Python-based notebooks, slides. This is Google Slides, so the Google version of PowerPoint. Tableau and QuickSight, these are sort of data visualization tools. It's actually part of this analyst development program. So essentially, it's going to be a rotational program, which is quite rare for non-recent grads. So that's pretty exciting. And this is often the bulk of the content, the bullet points here, your responsibilities. And this is the section you want to pay the most attention to, but make sure you don't ignore the other ones because they could have some key information which could make or break. And then they listing out some basic qualifications, preferred qualifications. Further down, they mention if they're a hybrid employer, what kind of benefits they have, this or that, salary range, etc. So once you've taken a first look, now it's time to reread it again and take some notes. I already did this prior to the video. You can see specifically these are my notes. I went through absolutely every sentence on the job post and wrote out what I think is the most important. I kind of stopped bolding partway through, but it is a good strategy to bold keywords, because if you resuscitate them in your interview, they will say, oh, yeah, we are looking for someone who has deep data analytics and wants high ownership and has experience in strategic decisioning, etc. So if you use their exact words, they are going to resonate with you a lot more. So I took it out. I completely, essentially rewrote the job posting. Further down, I summarized. Okay, I said, okay, here are just the pure notes. Now let me synthesize the information, summarize it to sort of understand their ideal candidate, what in their head is the dream candidate that they want. And you can do this based on how many times they mention particular skill sets. And then you say, okay, well, this is exactly what they want. Next, why don't we find a way to position yourself that way? So you take what they want and you try to mirror image your experiences as closely as you can to what you have now deducted to be their dream candidate. So I've decided the best way to position myself for this particular role is to show that I'm an experienced strategy professional who has led meaningful large-scale changes in my previous position. I am someone who is very strong analytically and can use tools to model and visualize. I am someone who can focus on the key findings and the storytelling component as effectively as possible. So just a quick aside here, you'll notice the higher up in your career you get, the less it becomes about completing a work process with as little mistakes to doing a large data analysis and then being able to communicate, to convey the findings, the recommendations in the most straightforward manner possible, because your managers and your VPs, they don't have time to go through your 30-page analysis. They want to understand in sometimes 30 seconds or less, sometimes 2 minutes or less, sometimes you get 5 minutes to do a presentation. They want to understand in that time frame exactly what is going on, what they should do, and how to proceed. So that's where storytelling comes into importance. Further, they want someone who works excellently with people and is able to influence at every level, as well as the leadership team. Now I say, okay, I understand exactly what they want. I can say I am exactly that person. Of course, they won't believe you. So then comes the formal process, kind of like a courtship. You guys kind of doing this little dance to decide if you're a fit, kind of like dating. But no one is completely straightforward in dating. You have to kind of test the person, see if they're real with what they say. So they're going to ask you specific questions to try to pull these skills out of you. And what you need to do to prepare is to come up with STAR stories. So STAR stands for situation, task, accomplishment, result. I think is accomplishment, but it doesn't really matter. So they'll be asking you questions like, tell me about a time you solved a complex problem using data. Very common question. You say, the situation, we were unclear on how much additional revenue we received from bundling products, for example. Instead of selling things by themselves, you created a bundle, like a combo pack. We want to see how much extra money we got from doing that. And because we weren't sure about it, we weren't sure how effective our bundling strategy was. So that was the situation. Your task was to complete a thorough analysis using non-uniform data at your company to find a solution. So what you specifically did was you reviewed all of the available data sources. You found you actually do not have your data. After speaking with your manager, you built a relationship with the data science team and worked hand in hand to build a dashboard showing these metrics at all times. The result was that now sales channel managers were able to review their bundling performance at any time. You were able to determine that the effectiveness of your bundling varied across different channels. So you later hosted a master session where successful channels shared best practices. So that is a star story. Generally, your star story should be some of your best accomplishments in your career. And in particular, you should be choosing star stories that best align with what they want based on the job description. So I'm going to be honest with you, this I just made it up. I have done a lot of very similar work, but I have not done that exact same thing. But that's my takeaway for you. Once you know exactly what kind of thing they want, you can actually make up these star stories, or you can reposition, sort of tell your story with a different angle to answer a different kind of question. Let's compare this star story where you start off by saying, this was the situation I was faced with, this was the specific task I took, and the specific action, and as a result of my hard work, the business saw meaningful value gain and strategic benefits. Imagine you just answered a question like this. Oh, well, we didn't know what kind of bundling results there were at our company, so then I just went ahead and built a dashboard to resolve that question that my manager asked me to do. Of course, which answer sounds a lot better? This one shows you have a clear understanding of the business environment. And by the way, I added this story here that you reached out, you built a relationship with the data science team, not to make it sound like you don't know what you're doing, but to make it sound like you are able to work with other stakeholders, other people in different departments in your organization, and build those relationships to get things done. That's what they want from a higher level leader. They don't want just someone who's going to be told what to do and then they just do that thing without ever breaking out of that box. Of course, depending on the position, you may not want to say that you had to reach out for help, but that's a call for you to make. Now we can see how these star stories can actually be applied to other questions. For example, describe a time I had to learn a new program or technology quickly. Okay, we can take the exact same example, but we can change it from I had to figure out what was the bundling metrics to I was required to use Tableau or Domo or Google Sheets to build a visualization. Through that process, I had to quickly learn to do it because there was a serious bundling question at my company, etc. Or very similarly, describe how I handled stress and varying priorities. Oh, I have, 3 or 4 main portfolio elements in my role, and specifically our VP asked us to understand how bundling products affects our company strategy. I then shifted this focus because the VP was requiring very short deadlines and I had to work with other teams to get it together, so I became a project leader in that time frame while also maintaining my duties in other roles. And then because of my task and my action taken, the result is that we found value add and we found synergies between all of these different portfolios. So you can see how preparing your star stories somewhere between 3 to 6 and often not from the exact same role, you can answer the majority of their questions. Second final step here, we want to anticipate their questions. So I did this below. It's usually going to be the same exact questions. So looking at it below, it's always going to be the same questions. Why our company? Why our department? Why would you be a good fit for this exact position? Tell me about yourself, or in other words, walk me through your resume. So these are the kind of the introductory questions that you can always expect. And then you're going to move into behavioral or situational questions. Tell me about a time you solved a complex problem using data. Describe a time you had to manage a difficult stakeholder. What is your biggest professional accomplishment? Describe a time I had to tell a manager their idea was bad. Describe a time I had to influence people without using direct authority. Describe learn a new program. How do you handle stress and priorities? These are the main questions. There's another like 5 or 6 kind of similar questions. For example, what is one weakness about yourself? Describe a time you had to overcome a failure. Sometimes there's these negative questions that can try to throw you off. Honestly, you can just very quickly Google like 10 more questions like this, or just ask ChatGPT or Google Gemini, which I use now. And here's what it comes down to. You can use your star stories to answer like 80% of these questions. And all of these questions, they're going to follow a very similar format. You're going to want to show humility. You're not going to say, I knew I was really smart and I was pushing and people weren't listening to me and that's why we failed. No, you can never answer like that. You have to answer, oh, well, I made a suggestion and I proved my case, and even though my manager didn't agree with my idea, I learned through that process that, for example, you sometimes have to prioritize relationships over trying to justify your accomplishment or something along those lines. Another example, how to influence people without using direct authority. Again, going back to the exact same star story, you can say, my personal analysis had found that we may be losing more money from bundling products than we initially anticipated. So I had to influence the data science team to create a dashboard, or I had to influence sales channel leaders to take a look at a bundling element and essentially convince them to come up with different operational plans to present to our VP, even though they didn't want to, etc. So you can really take your star story and kind of reposition the messaging to align to really any one of these very typical behavioral questions. There's 2 keys to understanding job postings and interviews. Number 1 is to understand exactly what kind of person they want, so you can show that you are that person. And number 2, you want to have your star stories ready because they are very applicable to the majority of the questions that'll be asked. And they're not really looking for, oh, did you actually do this or not? They're looking for, how will this person handle particular situations on the job? Like, it's not a test of whether you did what you said, it's a test of how do you think? How do you operate? What are your values? So that's why it's okay to kind of exaggerate or reposition the stories to fit what the message you're trying to portray. One thing I didn't really go into detail on this is question number 1, why capital 1? You do want to spend somewhere between 20 or 15 to 45 minutes kind of researching the company so you can come up with a good answer. Generally, you want to talk about how they're doing a lot of good, how they're winning awards, how if you have friends in the company, you want to get it right out of there. First question, you want to say, oh, my good friend Daniel Smith told me about the position and he loves the work culture here. That's going to score you massive points, by the way. So if you have a referral, mention it as early as possible. You want to mention you heard they have a great work culture. You know they won awards. They love to hear that kind of thing. You don't want to say, I just like that industry. I like that you're a big company and you offer job security. That's not a strong answer. So yeah. And oh yes, of course. And then the final step here is you want to prepare your questions to ask at the end. So these types of questions are, which exact teams will I be working with? How do you describe your leadership style to, if it's like the manager as opposed to the HR recruiter? Is there an opportunity to gain people management skills in this role? You can show that you're interested in becoming a manager later on. You might want to take this time to ask specific questions. For example, if you have kids and you need to pick them up from school, will you allow working hours like 7:30 to 3:30 p.m.? You want to ask questions which feel like you're just burning up to know what it would be like to already be inside of that position, inside of that company. And it's a bit of a psychological trick, because if you start speaking in a way where they're imagining you already working there, that might be the thing that pushes you over the edge, as opposed to someone who's feels a little bit more at distance. So that's the opportunity you want to take. Anyway, I hope you found that useful. This is a brand new channel, so I'm pretty new to making videos, but this interview style, this process has basically landed me 5 great jobs. I have a very high hiring rate relative to interviews. Maybe out of 3 interviews I get about 1 to 2 offers, so 50% higher rate. So I leave it to you. Please subscribe and like. If you need any one-on-one coaching, send me a direct message. Website to come up soon. And thanks so much for your time. Have a great day, beautiful people. Until next time.